Hi all. So the next topic we're going to cover is finding elements in a list. Now it turns out that when you have a list, a very common operation that you're going to want to do is to see if an element is in that list or not. So there's various different ways that you can do this in Python, and so let's look at a few. So the first one is with the in operator. Now the in operator is great because it essentially just reads like English. Let's say that I have the list A. I want to see if the number 2 is inside the list A. So I do the statement 2 in A. Now this is a statement which will return either true or false based on if the number 2 is inside of A. So if 2 is in A, which it is, it should return true. And as we see, it says true. We then check is 4 in A. Now notice how this list does not have 4 in it, and so 4 in A returns false. The other operator we can use, which is the opposite of in, is not in. So in this example, we check is 2 not in A. And so in order to see what this returns, we just have to ask ourselves, is 2 in A? Yes, and so this will return false. And as we see, 2 not in A returns false because there is a 2 in A. 4 not in A returns true because there is no 4 inside of A. And this way we can check if if an element is in a list or not in a list by using the in and not in operators. However, another thing you might want to check is just not if it's in the list, but how many times is it in the list. And so Python has an operator for that too. It's called the dotcount method. So this is not an operator like before, it's actually a method you call directly on a list, much like the string methods we used before. And so let's say again we have our great list A, and I want to see how many times does a 1 appear in it. I just do list A dot count of 1, dot count of 2, and dot count of 3. As we can see, that returns that there are 0 1s because there are no 1s in this list. There are in fact 4 2s, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's exactly 1 3 right here. So if we want to know the number of times an element appears, we'll use the dot count method. Now let's say that we don't want to know the number of times it appears, but we want to know more than if it's in the list. We want to actually know where in the list it is. So Python again has a great function for this. It's called the dotindex method. And so let's look at a quick example. Now to understand how this function works. Now let's say we have our list A again. I do a.index of 6. So the 6 is right here, which is the 0th, 1, 2, 3, 4th index. So as we expected, a.index of 6 returns 4 because that's the index of the 6. However, let's look at this example. We get the index of 2. But remember, there are 4 2s inside of the list A. So the question is, which index does it return? Now it turns out that Python takes the easy way out and just returns the first thing that it sees starting from the beginning. So 0 is the first index where there is a 2. So when we do a.index of 2, it returns 0 because that's where the first 2 is. However, there's another argument we can pass into index that'll help solve the issue of which 2 do we want. And that argument essentially says where to start looking in the list. So here, a of index, we have 2 arguments. We say find the element 2, but start looking at the first index. And so we skip the 0th index and we start looking at this 3. And thus, it's not here, but it's here. And so it's in the 3rd index. Thus, a.index of 2, 1 returns 3. In the final example, we start looking at the 4th index, so we start looking at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so then 2 is the next one we find here in the 5th index, and thus a of 2, 4 returns 5. Now there's a big problem with the index method, and that is that if we try to do .index on an element which is not inside the list, it actually crashes. So in this example, we have a smaller list A, still as awesome as the old list A, And when we do dotindex with 9, it actually returns an error. Thus, we need a way to be able to find the index of an element if it's in the list, and if it's not in the list, then simply say that it's not in the list without crashing. And we can do this by using the in operator. So here we check if 9 is actually in A, then give me the index. Otherwise, just tell me that it's not in the list. And so here we could see that it says 9 is not in the list, and so it doesn't crash instead of just crashing trying to find the index. So these are some of the ways that we can check if things are inside of lists, and these will definitely be really very useful functions when we're trying to write and solve real problems with lists.